Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, COVID exposed the contempt society has for marginalized people. The author of a new book says these folks are anything but passive.
People have always really resented the status of being disposable. They're conscious of it and imagine and fight for a better life.
Rock climbers with disabilities have found a home in Kentucky's Red River Gorge, which offers some pumpy crags.
It's basically 20 pull-ups in a row and figure out where I can grab my fingers into a hole or use a palm down method and try to push with one hand and pull with the other.
And the online world of Appalachian memes and what they tell us about the folks who live here.
I always say that these characters are an archetype and they're an amalgamation of multiple people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be funny because it wouldn't be relatable. And I think they take off because they're lovable people.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia.
Support for this program is brought to you by Solar Holler, helping Appalachian businesses and nonprofits manage energy costs through solar power. Information at solarholler.com. Support for this program is provided by the Thrasher Group, an architecture, engineering, and field services firm serving West Virginia clients and communities since 1983. More information at thethrashergroup.com.
Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. More than 1 million Americans have died from COVID-19. Some groups of folks died at much higher rates than others. And those deaths tended to follow lines of race, class, age, and disability. In other words, conditions that were already making life harder for some people played out during the pandemic too. A new book digs deeper. It's titled Disposable: America's Contempt for the Underclass. It's written by Sarah Jones, a reporter at New York Magazine who grew up in Appalachia. Sarah Jones, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia.
Thanks for having me.
So Disposable unpacks how systemic inequities in the U.S. played out during COVID-19. And you start the book with a couple of anecdotes, but pretty quickly pivot to your own family. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your pandemic experience?
Absolutely. In 2020, I was working on a lot of labor and workplace stories for New York Magazine, just trying to get a handle on how COVID was affecting people who were working for Amazon, people who were working on grocery stores, like people who were really on the front lines of the pandemic. And then, I was in the process of doing that when, unfortunately, my grandfather, who lived in Damascus, Virginia at the time, contracted COVID when he was in a rehab facility and unfortunately ended up passing away from the virus. It was sort of the combination of those two events. COVID, talking to folks who were trying to protect themselves and their families while making ends meet during COVID, and then, my grandfather dying from COVID in a way that made me wonder if it could have been prevented, right? If we could have afforded care for him at home, would he have been safer? And it just got me thinking about his own life, as he's a working class person from Maine who moved down to Washington County, Virginia to be with us as he got older, and just the circumstances of his life and how that may have made him vulnerable to COVID infection in ways that were not identical, but sort of overlapped a little bit with what I was hearing from other folks at the time. And that was really the impetus for writing the book in the first place. Just thinking about a death like my grandfather's is obviously a tragedy for my family, but it's also political, I felt, in a very real way. And I wanted to really dig into the vulnerabilities that I was seeing and treating them not as naturally occurring phenomenon, but, the result of political choices that this country's been making for a very long time.
Well, you've spent years writing about class disparities in America for Scalawag, for the New Republic, and now New York. And the pandemic seemed like a point where the rubber really hit the road on that. And you explore that in Disposable. When you got into reporting this book, what did you find about how the pandemic exposed class lines in the U.S.?
One thing that I really wanted to get across in the book is that the American workplace has often been dangerous over the years. for me, particularly as someone who grew up in Southwest Virginia, that was something I was acutely aware of, not just from growing up there, but from reading about the history of organized labor in the region. And if you do that, then you know, like, workplace safety has life or death stakes attached to it, and organizing against those circumstances can have life or death stakes attached to it. And so that was on my mind when COVID hit. And then, when I started writing the book, I really wanted to situate the events of COVID in that longer history. And really, where I think the facts take us is sort of this conclusion that, no one is responsible for COVID existing or happening. If it wasn't COVID, I think it would have been a different virus. But what happened during COVID, the way we reacted to COVID, and what made us vulnerable as a society to certain events during COVID, those were all human choices, and that to me could have been prevented.
You alluded to your background in Southwestern Virginia, but how did your childhood growing up in Appalachia shape your approach to reporting this book?
Yeah, it had a big influence in a way that I wish there was, I didn't want the book to be a memoir, although there is, my family's experiences do appear in it. But growing up where I did, and specifically learning about the history of the region when I was a little bit older, when I was a young adult, was really important. Not just reading about labor, but sort of the observations you have as a kid, right? Okay, my family is struggling, and a lot of the families around us are struggling. And then you get a little bit older and you realize people who don't live in this area have all kinds of ideas about people who do, and why so many of us might be poor, working class. And I wanted to sort of understand why that was the situation, and I wanted to understand what could be done about that situation. And so I was kind of going through that when I was in my early to mid-20s, and then, I always had an interest in journalism, but it really shaped my interest in journalism because I was curious about it. And, I'm not an academic, but this seemed like a way to sort of investigate the problem. When I thought about the stories I wanted to tell and what interested me and what my approach to covering politics was perhaps going to be, I didn't really want to be a White House correspondent. I wanted to talk to regular people. So it had a huge influence on me. And then going into COVID and writing this book, it was very much present for me and something I thought about a lot.
Disposable is a pretty damning indictment of the society in which we live, and it really sort of comprehensively explores inequities in a variety of realms that touch every aspect of our lives, from healthcare to elder care to differences in race. There's a chapter on how the political class has exploited and made this even worse. A lot of this seems really hard-baked into our society and culture and economy. Do you have some ideas for how we can overcome some of these issues?
Yeah, that's something that was certainly on my mind, and particularly in sort of the concluding chapter of the book. I didn't want to leave people on doom and gloom. I wanted to think about what could be different, because for me, pointing out what's wrong is really half the story. And it's important to identify these cracks in our society and how they got there, and maybe, the forces that are responsible for putting them there and the people who are responsible for putting them there. But we don't just do it to sort of point fingers, right? I mean, if you're doing that, the hope is that we could do something about it. And so when I was writing the book, and in my own life and my work as a reporter, I knew very well that the people I write about as being disposable are not passive people at all. They've always organized. They've always fought. Whether it was labor organizing, whether it was the civil rights movement or feminism or the welfare rights movement, or I write about the disability rights movement as well. People have always really resented the status of being disposable. They're conscious of it and imagine and fight for a better life. And so, although I'm not like an organizer myself, I'm a journalist, and I want to be humble about my limitations there. I wanted to include those stories so we can kind of look at what people have done in the past and think about ways that can inform what we're doing now. And when I was writing the concluding chapter of the book, I write about this notion of solidarity, which I don't think is a panacea necessarily, but is, I think, really key and really important to sort of fighting back against what I see as a status quo that encourages a certain level of acceptance of preventable and unnecessary death in this country. And what does it mean to feel solidarity with people, and how do you act on that? I think can be really subversive in a meaningful way. And I think that's just become more important now when you look at the political climate in this country at the moment.
Yeah, so speaking of the political climate in this country at the moment, COVID is still killing people, but a lot of people are eager to put the pandemic in the rear view. And some people, deny it ever happened. So when you look at the country now in 2025, what's changed since you were reporting your book? Where are we at now?
Yeah. This amnesia that I write about in the book is something that I still wrestle with, and something that I know my sources still wrestle with when they think about the people they've lost and how they lost them and why they lost them, and sort of the reactions they've encountered by relatives, friends who might say, well, your mom was overweight and that's why she died from COVID. And it has nothing to do with anything else, whether somebody was masking or unvaccinated, forget that. Kind of a refusal to sort of reckon with not only the reasons for the mass death, but also the consequences. I keep asking myself why that is. And, I wrote the book before Donald Trump was reelected. Sort of now looking back with the benefit of hindsight, it does seem to me that we are sort of incentivized to move on and not wrestle with it or reckon with it in a way, because as I write in the book, really reckoning with it is not just this act of memory, or thinking about the deceased. It's taking active steps to remaking the political climate in this country in a way where, should there be another virus, this isn't going to happen in the same way. And, a society where people aren't disposable at all might be a more robust and more resilient society when natural disaster does happen. And we're just not there. And as a political reporter, I've spent a lot of time thinking about why that is, but also kind of the roots of Donald Trump's appeal and how those two trends might overlap with each other. And, I think it's pretty clear from the polling and from what's been reported that, Trump was able to promise people in a persuasive way that he was going to bring jobs, he was going to bring prosperity, he was going to bring security. People believed that because many of them don't have it. And we saw him make inroads with new groups of people, new demographics kind of based on that appeal. And I think that that's something that is not solely due to the pandemic or what happened during the pandemic, but I think you're hard-pressed to argue that it had no influence at all.
Sarah Jones, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Sarah Jones is a writer for New York Magazine. Her book is Disposable: America's Contempt for the Underclass. It's available from Simon & Schuster. The mountains of Appalachia are home to some killer rock climbing. And in a lot of cases, its crags and cliffs are fairly easy to get to. That's why some groups are choosing Appalachia as a climbing destination, a place to return to time and time again. In 2023, Emily Chen Newton reported this story about why climbing festivals are making a home in Appalachia.
It's mid-October in Kentucky's Red River Gorge, and the trees are just beginning to take on their autumn colors as rock climbers from around the world flock to the region. The crunching of dried leaves and clanking of metal safety gear creates a type of rock climber's soundtrack. But on this particular weekend, you might also hear ATVs grinding up the trails, bringing wheelchair users to the area. This is the 4th annual Adaptive Climbers Festival, which brings together climbers with disabilities from across North America. Sydney Kessler is one of those climbers.
I've been climbing outdoors for now 2 days.
Sitting in the shade of the cliff, Sydney explains she started climbing indoors about a year ago. There, she learned some tricks like wearing knee pads to avoid bruises because she doesn't have much feeling or use in her legs from a spinal cord injury.
For me, my climbing it's basically 20 pull-ups in a row and figure out where I can grab my fingers into a hole or use a palm down method and try to push with one hand and pull with the other.
And every climber at this festival finds their own adaptations and accommodations to their different disabilities, visual, neurological, or limb differences. And the camping and transportation accommodations are just as varied as the climbing styles. The festival planning crew considers all of this when choosing the location.
For the Adaptive Climbers Festival, we have such a very specific list of needs.
This is Maureen Beck, who goes by Mo. Mo is an internationally decorated climber born without her lower left arm and one of the festival organizers. The Red River Gorge is known simply as the Red to climbers, and while it's renowned as some of the best climbing in the world for its overhanging sandstone cliffs or crags, she says that's not why the festival landed here.
As you can imagine, there's a world-class climbing, all over the country that have excellent world-class festivals. But you can't get a wheelchair to the base of the crag, or you don't have enough cabins for people to sleep in because they can't sleep in tents because of their medical conditions. And so for us, the Red fit this very narrow need of accessible crags, accessible lodging and camping, and then a community that can support us, because we've had this festival in 2 other locations, and the support we have gotten from the local climbers, local business owners here, is unparalleled to any place we've had this.
One of those local businesses is Lago Linda's Hideaway Campground, where the festival lodging is based.
The owners here at Lago Linda's are going above and beyond to retrofit their bathrooms to meet ADA compliance. They're adding ramps to all of their cabins and buildings. They, off the cuff, booked a band for Saturday night because they want everybody to have a good time.
Larry and Elaine Fredrickson run Lago Linda's Hideaway. They've added grab bars to the shared bathrooms and ensured the showers are large enough for wheelchairs and other mobility aids. The couple sat down with me before the event kicked off, and Elaine said why they do it is simple.
Once you sit up and look at the sky at night and you see those stars, it's just beautiful and peaceful. Nobody should be denied that. Nobody.
Another major part of the community system for the festival is the Muir Valley Nature Preserve and Climbing Area, where the adaptive athletes climb and teach their clinics. Like at the campground, ramps and railings were added for the event. Zane Paff is a local search and rescue volunteer and one of the valley's caretakers. He says Muir Valley and 2 search and rescue crews from surrounding counties support the festival with transportation in ATV buggies.
The Lee County will bring in their buggy, and the Wolf County will bring in their buggy, which these are just razors. We call them our rescue buggies. And then it's just a day of playing taxi and having fun.
He says riding in an ATV was new for most of the climbers last year.
I mean, they were joking around, having a blast, and psyching me up. And just none of them been in an ATV, so I'm like, well, hold on. Had a little bit of fun with it, but made sure we were being safe, too. And Muir Valley doesn't allow any electric or motorized vehicles except for this event, actually. And we're only using it for, like, anybody in a wheelchair, if they're missing a limb, can't get themselves to Bruise Brothers. We'll drop them right off at the climb that they want to go up.
I catch up with Sydney after she's finished one of those climbing routes, one of the many she's done with the help of Zane and his ATV. She tells me this sport reminds her of her recovery.
When you go on a wall, you don't exactly know what's ahead, and you just kind of figure it out as you go, and then you eventually make it to the top. So I feel like it shows you how to do hard things, and it gives you the confidence to believe that you can continue to do hard things even if you don't really know exactly what you're getting yourself into.
Something else she learned she could do this weekend was camping.
I was like, I don't know, I'm going to sleep in a tent and like pressure. So, like, there's a lot of things that you have to think about when you have a disability that...
Like pressure points?
Pressure points, or just getting in and out of a tent, like transferring from a wheelchair to a tent. I didn't know how exactly that would work, but I went straight from the chair down to the tent floor, so...
Oh, good. So you could get your chair into the tent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was like in the rain, underneath the rain...
Oh, the rain flag.
Rain flag, yeah. See, I don't know any of the terms.
She says it's the support of her adaptive family that makes it possible.
Even just a couple minutes ago, I was at the top, my arms were burning, I had to give it a little shake out, and you listen to it when you're up on the wall. You listen to all the people behind you cheering you on, and it's a truly supportive community. It's hard to find that supportive community that don't treat you in a certain way because of your disability, but they're there to support you in however they can to help you do what you want to do. It's literally like a mindset of whatever it takes to get you to where you want to go, that you have the people power to do it.
And the people power is exactly what Mo emphasizes too. Much of the climbable land in the Red and throughout Appalachia is owned by individual people or private organizations. This is in contrast to the western United States, where many climbing areas fall under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management or other public land governance. In fact, nearly 60% of all climbing in the U.S. is on federally managed land, making the Red and other such areas in and around Appalachia unique. The folks who run Muir Valley can reserve cliffs for special groups because they own the land. There was a quick conversation, Mo says, when they asked to use the area for the festival.
They were more than willing to shut down crags for us. One of them was one of the most popular crags in the entire gorge.
And that's not the only part of the Appalachian landscape that makes it a good fit for this event.
Most of even the walking paths here are dirt and soft and gentle. They're not like huge rocky scree things. And when you stop to think about it, so many of them are on these old or even currently used oil roads or logging roads, and it's just gentle.
Climbing areas throughout Appalachia feature these access roads that are currently used by or left by extractive industries like timber, natural gas, and oil. With trails originally forged as logging or oil access roads, they're much wider, more even, and more accessible than what you get at other climbing destinations. Many of the trails in Muir Valley are modified logging cuts, making them great for ATVs. You might not be able to follow an access road all the way to the base of a climb, but you can get pretty dang close. This is the case for one of the Red's most famous areas, the Motherlode.
So, we were able to bring one of our wheelchair athletes to the Motherlode last year. And most of the time he was still in his chair. And that's always a big goal with folks who use chairs, is to keep them in it. A little bit he had to get backpacked and carried. But it's like a huge dignity and safety thing. Like, the more they can be in their chair, the better for that human. For the Motherlode, it was like 80% of the time he was in that chair. And, not all of our athletes, I think when people think disabled athletes, they think a lot of wheelchairs. But we have a lot of folks with walkers or who use side sticks or who just use trekking poles. Or, we have a lot of athletes whose, legs work fine, but maybe they can't carry a pack that far.
And no matter a person's disability, they're welcomed as part of the family. One big family reunion is something I've heard over and over again while reporting on this event for 2 years now. So it makes sense that the small family-run businesses are such an integral part of the gathering. Miguel's Pizza is one of the most well-known local businesses and a staple of the festival lunches. Zane says Miguel's is emblematic of the festival vibe.
It's like you see over at Miguel's, just like families running businesses, and even Lago Linda's is family owned and operated. So you're just getting a big warm welcome when you come down here.
But Kentucky's Red River Gorge isn't the only Appalachian climbing destination serving as a home base for niche festivals. Homo Climbtastic is the largest queer-friendly climbing gathering in the world, and for over a decade, they've called Fayetteville, West Virginia, their home, climbing in the New River Gorge. I spoke with one of the organizers, Jay Dempsey, over the phone about how the town shows their support.
They're putting together window displays full of color for us, and to see pride flags all over town at almost every business. It can make you cry. Yeah.
He says Fayetteville, being a small town, facilitates climbers and locals actually connecting. For example, when picking out a place for dinner.
You're going to choose from one of, 10 restaurants, probably a locally owned family restaurant. You're going to feel more connected to the town where you're staying. You're going to feel that reason why all the locals choose to live there.
For nearly the whole life of the festival, Homo Climbtastic has been hosted at the Whitewater Guide Company and Campground, Cantrell's Ultimate Rafting. Owner Nancy Cantrell spoke with me over the phone in between hopping on reservation calls.
I don't have anybody else on the phones this time of year because we're getting ready to shut her down.
Cantrell's is the only family-owned and operated raft guide company in West Virginia. Nancy and her husband Richie are West by God born and raised, and they've seen the shift in the economy in Fayetteville over the years, spurred on by groups of rafters and climbers.
We grew up here. We were raised, grew up in Hinton, an hour and 15 minutes south. And, of course, rural West Virginia and southern West Virginia is not greatest for employment anymore because we've lost the coal industry. So high-priced jobs aren't there. Most of us are dependent on the tourist industry, unless you're a school teacher, pretty much. So any type of gathering like this and events and large number of people that come in really helps that economy. But the homoclimatastics, they go out, they eat at several of the different local eateries. They shop in the outfitter stores for equipment. I mean, they bring a lot of additional income into the area that helps sponsor jobs that people really need in this area.
Just like how the folks who run the campground in Kentucky installed ramps and grab bars for their campers' safety, Nancy also takes precautions to make sure everyone at the queer-friendly event is safe while at Cantrell's.
Now, I close my campus when they come. It is their campus. This is their home while they're here. You got a common bathhouse. I don't have to worry that there's any kind of altercation going on or issue or anything like that. It's just a nice, safe environment for them.
The support and protection is certainly felt by the climbers. Here's Jay Dempsey again.
In a world where there is a difference between accepting and welcoming, they're incredibly welcoming. It's warm. They learn everyone's name. It's just a great place to kind of call home for a weekend.
Jason Traylor is another member of the Homoclimtastic crew. Talking over a video call, he said that Fayetteville feels like a safe location because it's rural but not totally isolated.
Having a place that's not remote allows you to have more like safety protocols and things like that nature, because that's like a huge thing with any like queer event, to be able to like get help that we may need.
Both the adaptive and queer climbing communities have within them even more diversity than their niche names suggest. And it's important to say here that many climbers of color within these communities and beyond don't always feel at home in Appalachian climbing destinations. Jason, who's Black, says he's always felt safe and welcomed at Homoclimtastic, but...
And I've talked to like other BIPOC people when they go in these areas. They just, they feel, just the stares, even if they're not like judgmental stares. It's just the stares, but like, who's to say what they mean?
We'll hear more about climbing festivals in Appalachia after the break.
Support for WVPB is provided by the Huntington Museum of Art, presenting Joyful Spirits, Haitian art from the Winslow Anderson Collection through February 8, 2026. Details at hmoa.org.
Before the break, we heard how adaptive climbing groups have made Appalachia a destination. Let's pick back up with Emily Chen Newton as she returns to the Red River Gorge in Kentucky.
Back in Kentucky, festival goers sit on a long wooden bench waiting to climb. Karima Batts is a Black adaptive climber waiting for her turn. And she says there's safety in numbers.
Oh, I feel safe right here with my homies. I feel great. But when I'm on my way here, no. No.
And would you ever come to the Red on your own?
No.
It was just like
I gotta be with a safe group of some sort, something.
It's only in recent years that conversations about race and inclusion have been embraced by climbing culture as a whole.
Things happening in 2020 allowed me to be a little bit more open about how I've always felt like the last 12 years, because I've always been the Black paraclimber all the time. I enjoy being in a space. I enjoy my community overall. But there's certain instances when I've traveled or, kind of feel like I'm on the outside looking in.
There are some initiatives within the climbing community at large to do things like change the names of climbing routes originally using racist or bigoted terms. Karima has been part of some of these efforts.
You're going to make everyone feel safe? Impossible. But can you improve it? Yes.
Jason from Homoclimtastic says the name changes benefit everyone, not just select groups of people.
I think it makes it more welcoming as not just for individuals, but also for the mainstream family, and just to understand we as human beings evolve. And so that means if we as human beings evolve, that means our communities must evolve with it.
Nancy Cantrell has been around long enough to see her community of Fayetteville, West Virginia evolve because, she says, of the influence of those who came originally for the white water and the rocks.
a lot of those initial outdoor adventurers that came into the area to enjoy the area ended up moving here. They're adults now. Some of them are in their 60s, so their kids have came up through the school system, and now their kids have got kids in the school system. And they've certainly demonstrated their commitment to the area and proven it. And I think the locals that actually were born here see that and respect that. And, it's a very blended, eclectic little community. For Southern West Virginia, it's an anomaly. And it's been because of the outdoor adventure community that is how it's evolved.
The outdoor adventure economy in Kentucky's Red River Gorge isn't quite as mature as Fayetteville's, but it's heading in that direction, with new signs for kayak and cabin rentals popping up each year. Over a couple slices of the legendary pizza at Miguel's, I talk with John May. He's chief of the Wolfe County Search and Rescue, which provides ATVs for the Adaptive Festival. We're at one of the outside tables, every one of them packed. There's a basketball court behind us, and John waves to a cliff line in the distance.
Used to be a pasture up there with cattle roaming, and now you might see a cabin. You still see the pastures too, some people don't want to give that up, but it's giving the local community, a way to, maybe live a little better life, because a lot of my friends now are building cabins. We built a couple of cabins, and, and it's good. It's a good business. So
John has lived here his whole life, and he says that climbing is bringing a new perspective about the value of the land in the area.
Because we mainly have farmers and people that work in coal industry, and cliff lines were a way cattle would fall off and die, and now it's like, what? I can build a cabin on that, and I can rent that cabin out, so I think people are starting to see the opportunity in it, not just if you own a business and selling food, but maybe you're a guide, and you can go out and make a good living doing that. And it's really changed, how people look at some of the property that they own for generations, and now they're kind of making money off of it instead of just raising farm animals.
The change in perspective goes both ways, though. Mo, the Adaptive Festival organizer, has climbed all over the world, and she says her opinion of Kentucky changed after actually spending time here.
Even when I had heard of the Red River Gorge, I was like, ugh, Kentucky. Like, I'll never love Kentucky. Like, what's Kentucky? And now I'm like, oh my God, can I buy a house in Kentucky, please? It's one of my favorite places. Like, climbing's amazing like that, though. This activity, it's this hobby, it's this passion that just lets you see the world through a different lens, not only because you're literally on a cliff 100 feet up, but because you're just experiencing places that you would never think about otherwise.
And wanting to become even more involved, Mo says they plan to add a community service project to the festival.
Because, I think so many people in our community are used to being served. And I think people are used to serving us. And I would love to flip that around and be like, no, we can also be a part of this community and give service back to it.
Homo Climbtastic has their own way of giving back. They raise money with their annual drag show for local causes. Last year, the money was given to a safe house for queer youth in Morgantown, West Virginia. And efforts like these are how they've become part of the eclectic community in Fayetteville. Nancy says they're like family.
We just fell in love with them, and it is like a reunion for us now.
This is just how Larry and Elaine talk about the adaptive climbers who come to their campground. It's the last night of the gathering, and they heard two climbers who met at the Kentucky Festival last year wanted to get married this year. So they're pulling out all the stops. Unprompted, they arrange for a bluegrass band and a hairdresser for the bride. I catch Elaine bringing candles and mason jars to her crew working on the ceremony archway.
I love what you did here. It's so beautiful.
She tells me the archway and homemade cake are decorated with flowers from the surrounding woods.
They're working with natural flowers and lights, all from this area. And we do have some that is plastic, but majority are from... It's October. Correct.
They're busy getting ready, but she gives me a quick tour of the party supplies inside.
We got lights, we got decorations, we have tablecloths, we have a champagne for them. It will be on ice, but it's in the fridge right now. We have a guest book, which I think is the most important thing, so they can go back and see who has attended their wedding.
The ceremony was beautiful, and as the night went on, the blended community that's forming here was on full display. The wooden slats of the dance floor vibrated with bluegrass tunes and rock climbers, some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetics, all dancing. Sydney says this was an important moment for her.
Usually if I'm dancing, I'm with people that are, jumping, and that's great, but I'm usually the only chair user. And so the fact that I'm dancing with other chair users and people that maybe they don't have your exact circumstance, but they have something, or they're here for some reason, there's literally no other community like it.
Mo says that their community service next year could be an accessible trail project or trash cleanup, but no matter what, they plan on calling this place home for a while. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Emily Chen Newton, in the red.
Electricity prices continue to rise, and people aren't happy about it. In West Virginia, Appalachian Power customers have been paying hundreds of millions of dollars in hidden costs. That money is going to buy power from 2 coal plants that aren't even located in the state. WVPB's Curtis Tate has more.
Appalachian Power customers protested a proposed rate increase at the West Virginia Public Service Commission in July.
Stop AEP ripoffs! Stop AEP ripoffs!
The PSC denied Appalachian Power's rate proposal in August amid an intense public backlash to the rising cost of power. But what customers may not have known is that for years, they've been paying an extra cost on their monthly bills. It's for electricity that's more expensive than available alternatives. And it's from a pair of 70-year-old coal-burning power plants outside the state in a contract state regulators never approved. Devi Glick is an energy analyst with Synapse Energy Economics. She calculated that Appalachian Power customers have overpaid more than $328 million since 2018.
It's not serving the ratepayers' best interests. It's in the owner's best interest to try to just string it along as long as possible and as long as they're allowed to.
West Virginia Public Broadcasting performed its own independent analysis using similar data and found nearly identical results. Other states have walked away from the plants. Ohio lawmakers earlier this year repealed a subsidy for the plants that was costing consumers hundreds of millions of dollars. Michigan regulators last year denied a request to have consumers pay for losses at the Kiger Creek and Clifty Creek power plants, which are part of the Ohio Valley Electric Corporation, or OVEC.
Any amount that was being paid to OVEC above market was disallowed.
Today, the OVEC plants are sending electricity to Appalachian Power's 1.1 million customers in West Virginia and other customers in the surrounding states. Delegate Evan Hansen is a Democrat and minority chairman of the House Energy and Public Works Committee. He says the OVEC contract is an example of the state's nearly exclusive dependence on coal to generate electricity.
I think that we need a real sober look at why West Virginia's electric rates have gone up faster than any other state over the last 15 years. It's due to an over-reliance on a single energy source that has become more and more expensive compared to alternatives.
Hansen's efforts to curb the growth in electricity costs have faced high hurdles in a legislature with a pro-coal Republican supermajority in both chambers. For example, here's Senate Energy Committee Chair Chris Rose speaking in support of coal-fired generation.
And this resolution is a way to get back to what works, merit-based energy, the coal underneath their feet.
West Virginia Public Broadcasting asked Republicans to comment for this story. None did. Appalachian Power says the OVEC plants provide capacity and reliability to customers. Consumer advocates say new demand can be met with natural gas, renewables, and battery storage at a lower cost. If nothing changes, the OVEC plants will remain under contract to their owners, including Appalachian Power parent American Electric Power, until 2040. The OVEC plants were at the center of one of the biggest public corruption scandals in Ohio history. Key officials accepted $61 million in bribes in exchange for bailing out the plants. In West Virginia, Hansen says he plans to reintroduce legislation that would more clearly define what it means for the PSC to serve the public's interest. I'm Curtis Tate in Charleston.
Humor runs deep here in Appalachia. Even online, where memes about mountain life seem to go viral all the time. Last fall, Folkways reporter Madeline Miller brought us this story about 2 artists who've taken holler humor to the digital realm.
Scrolling through Andy Marie Tillman's TikTok is like hanging out at a family reunion. Her sketches feature all kinds of characters, like Papaw, who's always piddling in the garage and telling silly jokes.
I want you to look here at this new pup. They done learned this thing how to play hide and go seek. Name it Dog, I guess. I mean, I ain't got time to go naming everything I got. Come on.
There's Aunt Pam, who Andy Marie describes as the black hole purse lady. She's the one who passes out snacks from her bag at church.
That's good singing. Here, she's wanting gum too. Here, pass it down. Nope, you don't need a whole piece. God won't be able to hear you with all that gum in your mouth.
And then there's the character who Andy Marie calls her heavily medicated aunt, who's usually trying to make you a casserole.
How's your mom doing? She's not doing good, is she, hon? I hate to hear that, but I could make y'all a casserole. You know, your mom used to love my chili. But I don't make that.
Andy Marie is a content creator and humorist from Eastern Tennessee who currently lives in Nashville. She's a self-described silly person who's dabbled in just about every area of the performing arts, including music. She started doing these impressions on stage in between her songs. At first, when people told her she should be a comedian, she was sad that they weren't as moved by her music. But then she realized that they might be onto something.
People have always told me that I need to put some of my characters online, and I didn't even know about TikTok. And I really just did it for funsies one day. And then my Papaw character really took off.
Over the years, Andy Marie has gained quite the social media following, with almost 500,000 followers across all her platforms. Characters like Papaw and Aunt Pam are fan favorites for a reason.
I always say that these characters are an archetype, and they're an amalgamation of multiple people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be funny because it wouldn't be relatable. And I think they take off because they're lovable people.
With such a large following, it's clear her characters are relatable, especially when they remind fans of their own loved ones. In fact, some of Andy Marie's sketches have even helped people through difficult times in life.
When people tell me that it helped them through like bereavement period after someone died, that's when it feels real. Because a lot of times it doesn't feel real, and I don't know that I'm doing anything because I'm being so silly. You know, I'm like, this can't possibly be, this is dumb. This can't possibly be worth anything. But when somebody tells me it helped them through grief, that's when it feels real.
Andy Marie isn't the only one portraying life in Appalachia in the digital realm. So is another creator who goes by the name Little Bubby Child. Under the alias of Bubby Wade, they create cartoon vignettes of people you might run into in eastern Kentucky where they live. With their chicken scratch art style and use of local dialect, Little Bubby Child's memes bring rural Kentucky to life. Typically, the memes don't include sound, but on occasion they voice a meme, like in this one, where Bubby Wade tells his dad about a kid he met at school.
Hey, Dad, guess what? What? There's a boy in my class called Michael. Said his parents named him after Michael Jordan because he could jump so high. That's plumb wild, ain't it? Well, what'd they do, just call him baby till he's old enough to jump? He lied to me.
Bubby's real identity is a secret, and while I wasn't able to speak with the person behind the memes, I was able to speak with Dr. Sarah Craycraft. Sarah's a lecturer of folklore and mythology at Harvard University and a big Little Bubby Child fan. Sarah's from Appalachian, Ohio, and she came across Little Bubby Child when her sister sent her the memes.
I think, if you're in Appalachian circles, it's inevitable to come across Little Bubby Child.
Inevitable because Little Bubby Child is very popular, with nearly 500,000 Instagram followers. The memes reference all kinds of things that resonate with fans, from potted meats and Marilyn Manson to Beanie Babies and dollar stores.
Some gal uptown asked me what's the difference between Family Dollar and the Dollar Tree. I said, "Law, honey, if you don't already know, I sure can't explain to you."
Sarah says that what she likes so much about Little Bubby Child is that the memes reflect a version of her childhood and family stories that feels genuine.
It felt like a genuine sense of home and a celebration of making do and just the silly people in our hometowns that we know and love, but that aren't seen maybe or talked about or celebrated or recognized in ways that are kind and caring. So instead of being tropes, it just becomes this is a social world that you're a part of and that's familiar to you.
Sarah recently lectured on Little Bubby Child in one of her classes at Harvard as a way to talk about the importance of dialect. She says that it wasn't just the students from Appalachia who resonated with Little Bubby Child. Those with ties to rural places outside of Appalachia also felt a connection to the memes.
It was an interesting kind of realization for us that what we think of as Appalachia maybe is a rural experience. What we think of as very local is maybe not as local as it seems. Maybe the picture of mainstream America should shift to reflect this a little bit more than other kinds of Americanness or ways of being American.
There was one Little Bubby Child character in particular that sparked a lot of conversation about what it means to be Appalachian, the Goth Brother.
We named our black metal band The Awfulest Mess Ever Was, because that's what my papa calls everything I like.
The Goth Brother is Bubby's older and more alternative brother. His spiky black hair and face piercings perfectly complement Bubby's red mullet. The Goth Brother loves online fantasy games and his son, Goro.
So in some ways it was like affirming of tropes or stereotypes or things that people might associate with the region, but in other ways it was like blowing open some of the ideas of who lives in Appalachia.
In her class, Sarah and her students discussed how to classify Bubby's content. She explained that Bubby's jokes fit into a lineage of Appalachian humor.
I do think there is a lovely, rich culture of humor in Appalachia, and a lot of it is just clever, insightful observations of everyday life. It is people making humor out of the stories all around them.
Bubby's memes do sound like jokes that you'd hear just out and about in Appalachia or talking with your friends and family. That's one of the reasons that people in the region send them to those who aren't in the area anymore.
Sometimes the humor can also open up and connect the diaspora, people who have relationships to the region, people who have had to leave and miss home. And I think, the big part of why Little Bubby Child and Andy Marie Tillman's content resonates is that it reaches beyond the small community. It lets people connect outside of regional boundaries.
And that's why there's such a great way to remember your loved ones and let them know that you're thinking of them.
I love you. And I miss you, and I'm thinking about you every day and night.
I love you too, Mama.
I love you, honey. I really do.
Well, I appreciate that.
Every day and night. Every day and night.
For Inside Appalachia, I'm Madeline Miller.
That story is part of our Folkways Reporting Project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. Finally, apple cores, potato peels, and other food waste are a big climate problem when they end up in landfills. Now, the city of Pittsburgh is giving residents a chance to save their food waste from becoming just trash. People can drop off food waste at city-run farmers markets, where it then becomes compost. The Allegheny Front's Isabel Kim visited the farmers market in the East Liberty neighborhood and brought us this.
My name is James Longenecker, and I'm the farmers market manager for all 4 city parks farmers markets. Farmers are here, people are here. If they had scraps that they knew they weren't going to use before they rot, they can put them here then, and then also wanted to have some sort of outlet for waste, quote unquote, at the city. Any scraps that they have from peelings or anything that don't go into stock are then able to be put into our buckets at market. So we're up to about 8 buckets a week. Those are like 20-gallon buckets, so they're not just little ones.
We brought some compost. Can you just show how people can drop off their food waste over here?
Wonderful. Yeah. You can come to the bright neon tent at the City Parks Farmers Markets and find our free compost drop off here signs. What kind of greens are these? Collard greens, green beans. Goodbye food scraps. We'll see you in your compost.
My name is Laura Toten-Kadori. I am the owner and founder of Warm Return. We are a local composting company. So we go around, we pick up buckets from all over the city. I think right now we're getting about 4 to 8 from the city farmers markets. We take them to our sites. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for that material to break down to what we call mostly digested material. We'll then sift that out to pull out the undigested material, which is usually going to be pineapple tops and corn cobs and avocado pits. And then what comes through the sifter, the digested material, will then let age for anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And then it's ready to go on the ground in somebody's garden, in a community garden, and grow plants and start the whole process again.
One thing that composting does is it connects people to the idea of cradle to cradle design, you know, that when we have decomposing food, it can give life to the next round of food.
My goal has always been to make the entire city of Pittsburgh a city that composts, that we don't have any food garbage going to landfills. It's a slow process. Most of it is a lot of education. One thing people don't realize, and even I myself didn't realize this years ago, when we throw food scraps into a landfill, you're like, oh, well, it breaks down, it disappears. So it disappears, but into methane gas, which is more potent than carbon dioxide. And so through our process of keeping it out of landfills, we are affecting climate change in a positive way. There are just so many benefits to what we're doing environmentally and for the community in terms of keeping them fed with what was garbage.
The hassle of saving your food scraps and then dropping it off at market, it's a small one. It makes a big difference from an ecological perspective. And the hope is that we can continue to expand it to divert methane-producing scraps from being a hindrance to being helpful.
That was the Allegheny Front summer intern, Isabel Kim. For tips on composting at home, visit the Allegheny Front. Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Jerry Milnes, John Ingram, Tim Bing, Paul Loomis, and Blue Dot Sessions. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Clara Hazlett. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe to our newsletter and stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.